I'll just be honest with you. I don't believe that we learned a whole lot during Cowboys minicamp. That being said, here are three things that we did. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I'm your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, usually streaming with you live Sunday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central, catching up with you guys in between Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Today, though, no live show on a Thursday night because I'm out of town. I am going to Mexico, to Querétaro, to Querétaro. I don't know why I said it in English, and that was dumb and silly from me. But hey, I'm going to Querétaro to watch Mexico's bowl, which is a bowl for the Pro League here in Mexico. I'm going to be covering it, doing some work over there. So today, instead, we'll have a conversation about minicamp. I don't think that we learned a whole lot. I'll give you an example. I wanted to learn more about the rotations of the offensive line. Who is backing up Tyler Guyton, or who is playing right at left tackle? Just who is getting snaps there? Who is the backup at left guard? Who is playing right tackle? Are we going to do a swing tackle? Is it going to be one side and one side like in previous years where, for example, Matt Waletzko wasn't really a swing guy. He just took care of one side of the offensive line. I wanted to learn about that. I wanted to hear something about Eric Scott Jr., whatever, the most minimal thing. I heard he got a pick. That doesn't mean much, though, in minicamp. I wanted to learn a whole lot about Cowboys players that I feel like I didn't, honestly, during minicamp. So today, I thought I would keep it real with you, say that, and also, we didn't learn about Trey Lance, right? He had a big-time throw for what I hear, right? A 40-yard completion to one of the Jalen's. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Jalen Brooks, but I'm not sure. Other than that, though, it's like very impossible to learn something about players this time of the year when there's no live contact, when they are mixing and matching the second team with the third team, and then a little bit of the first team sprinkled on top. It's just hard. So what you do learn, though, during minicamp is comes from interviews, players and coaches talking to reporters, and that's what we'll talk about tonight, because I have three things that I believe we did learn from Cowboys minicamp. And coming in at number one, we had a show about this, but I've got some notes on this. Deuce Vaughn is trying out at wide receiver. We talked about it because it was exciting, right? When we learned about it, when Deuce Vaughn talked about it, spending some time with the wide receivers, kind of like a day by day kind of thing, where he came in and wherever the coaches told him to go, he went. Talked about spending time with Brandon Cooks, talked about watching Cole Beasley, all of that we learned. But I didn't think how big it was until later when we heard Mike McCarthy speak on Deuce Vaughn trying out at the new position. This is not to say that he's going to abandon running back or anything like that, but he's just trying to tap into those pass catching abilities and maybe looking at some time in the slot as well. Who knows? If he's a dynamic playmaker with the ball in his hands, you look for ways to get him the ball, right? Obviously. And if you're not comfortable with what he does in pass pro, you just find ways to get him involved, right? And Mike McCarthy talked about several players being on a similar boat as Deuce Vaughn, in the sense of being players that have dual position potential, is how Mike McCarthy put it. And he talked about this being the time of year, OTAs and minicamp, to cross-train those players, to have players experiment a little bit on the playing field. And he talked about the reason behind it being the anatomy of a 53-man roster, which makes a lot of sense, right? If you've got a player that is going to make it as a number 3 running back, what else can he do other than just play running back? And this is when it hit me. Deuce Vaughn is not really a special teamer. Who knows if with the new kickoff rules, they're going to get him over there on the landing zone alongside Kevontae Turpin, and maybe they're going to get him more involved in that sense. But as of right now, Deuce Vaughn has not been a factor for the Cowboys on special teams. And I wrote about this for ADZsports.com. I dug a little bit deeper into the numbers. Deuce Vaughn had 31 special team snaps as a rookie. And 3 of those, let me tell you the actual number, actually, man. Let me tell you the actual number. 28 of those happened in 3 games. Played 7 games last season. So that means that in the other 4 games, he had only 4 special team snaps, right? 1 per game, basically. No, 3 special teams. Not even 1 per game for Deuce Vaughn. And the interesting thing about the 28 snaps that he did get in a span of like 3 games, not consecutive, but it happened in blowout games, right? So he had a lot of snaps versus New England Patriots when the Cowboys blew them out. He had a lot of special team snaps versus the Giants when they blew them out the second time. And then he had a lot of special team snaps when they lost by a blowout to the San Francisco 49ers. But Deuce wasn't out there really on the field when the special teams went out there because he doesn't have the size to be a blocker, to be a tackler. He basically has to be a returner or nothing, right? So if you're making it as a number 3 running back and you are not providing a ton of special teams value because the team already has a Pro Bowl caliber returner, you either, in my opinion, have to have one of 2 things. You either have to be a very dynamic playmaker that makes the trade-off worth it, right, of what you do and what you bring to the table in offense, or and that could look like you playing 2 positions, right? You having that positional flex and being able to play wide receiver, but at least in some way he can be depth at wide receiver if the Cowboys like what they see in the slot. Not ideal, I know, but if you're playing 2 positions, right, if you're filling 2 roles, that is going to provide value for you to stay on the roster. I thought that was very interesting. I think in hindsight, it really is massive for Deuce Vaughn if he can impress his coaches working the slot at wide receiver, because I do think that's going to help him get on the roster because he has that handicap of not being able to be a special teamer unless he's a returner. So I think it's bigger even than when we first talked about it, honestly. So that's thing number 1 that we learned in minicamp. Deuce Vaughn working at wide receiver a little bit. The number 2 thing that I believe we learned, this is not necessarily confirmed, but it's starting to feel like it. I think that we learned that there's a starting battle at number 3 in terms of the wide receivers. This tweet from Bobby Belt over from 105.3 The Fan, among his minicamp practice notes, look at the last one here on the screen. Jalen Brooks had some nice catches once again today. I think I like him more than Jalen Tolbert as receiver number 3 right now. Oh boy, now that's a statement. I'm going to tell you what, though. It isn't one that, I don't think Bobby is alone on this train. I've heard from several people that, they're looking at this as a battle. Jess Navarez tweeted this early on in OTAs from the Dallas Cowboys podcast network. She tweeted out that, hey, there might be a battle going on here. Like Tolbert is going to have to earn it. And let's be honest with ourselves. We didn't think this was going to be the case going into the offseason. We thought it was going to be Jalen Tolbert at number 3, and we thought it was going to be Jalen Brooks making the roster alongside Kevontae Turpin and somebody else maybe, right? If they carry 6 wide receivers, maybe Ryan Flournoy, the 5th-round pick, which just because he's a 5th-round pick, I guess would make him the favorite over some other of the UDFA guys. But man, Jalen Brooks apparently is not only separating himself from the pack as a number 4 wide receiver, he is going to put up a fight for number 3. And that is officially one of the biggest things that I want to look at when training camp starts in late July over there in Oxnard. So I think that's one of the 3 things that we learned from minicamp. Number 3, this might be boring for many people, but number 3, I was this close to going with Zach Martin potentially retiring in 2025, but there was already some speculation on that front, and maybe we'll talk about it later on in the dead period of the offseason. But instead, I went with maybe some boring stuff, but it's relevant. We learned about weight stuff. And what I mean by that is we had at least 3 important notes regarding the weight of significant players. And one of those was Overshown saying that he was going to add 13 pounds, or that was his goal this offseason, and that he did it even though he was dealing with the injury and all that. But Overshown revealing that he's going to play at 13 pounds above what he played in 2023 during the preseason, at least in training camp, that is going to take him from 220, which is what he is listed at the Cowboys roster. It's still on the website, or at least up until a few days ago. He's going to take that up to 233, 235, which is, for context, somewhere along the lines of Eric Kendricks, who's going to be playing Mike for the Cowboys. Overshown also said that he's going to be playing as the weak side linebacker. Damon Clark is going to be playing as a strong side linebacker. But just confirmation there on having heavier linebackers under Mike Zimmer, who is going to still be very aggressive, and he's still going to have a lot of creative stuff going on his defense, but he's going to be more traditional in the build of the front seven, and that includes linebackers being a little bit heavier than they were under Dan Quinn, excuse me. So that's one of them. Tyler Smith is also going to be playing a little bit heavier, potentially. Mike McCarthy mentioned this kind of like briefly, and maybe he didn't go in depth into it, so I'm not sure what to make of it. But when he was talking about Tyler Smith focusing on just playing guard, he mentioned that it would allow Tyler to maybe play at 8 pounds heavier because you don't have to deal with the athleticism demand, maybe is a word. He's not going to be dealing with that demand for athleticism on that you need to have on the edges, right? Because he's not going to be working at tackle anymore, and there's not going to be a potential for him to do so, bearing any major injuries. So Tyler Smith is going to be more comfortable being heavier, if you will, playing inside at guard and mauling people and doing his thing, being a nasty blocker. Now, one more thing about weight, Jake Ferguson. McCarthy revealed that Ferguson struggled with weight in his first 2 years in the NFL. Basically, he said at the end of seasons, he was not keeping it up. Like, he was unable to stay at his weight. So year 3, Jake Ferguson is no longer going to be on special teams because obviously this is somebody that has earned himself the tight end 1 role by a mile. It's now no longer a competition. He's instead establishing himself as one of the best at his position in the league. Maybe they find a way to really get that weight target down, and maybe we see a better and better and better Jake Ferguson at the end of seasons, right? Now that they know what he can do, now that they've got more tape on him and they know exactly what they're going to ask him to do. Because McCarthy talked about how they determine player weights. And I know this might have been nerdy, but I like it. I like to learn about how teams think. And he mentioned the 2 things that basically determine that, which is 1, what are we going to ask you to do? What are your assignments going to be, right? And in the case of Jake Ferguson, they're not afraid of having him block people because he can be nasty, right? When he's asked to chip and do this and do that, he's been a good run blocker, at least a willing run blocker. So they know what they can ask him, but also, what are his snap counts going to be like? And maybe the Cowboys were thinking that it wasn't going to be as clear that he was going to run away with the tight end 1 role in 2023. Maybe now they know he's going to be an ace and he's going to be out there on the field as much as he can. So maybe they have a better plan for his weight, and maybe that leads to an even better version of Jake Ferguson, particularly late in the year. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for tuning into the show today. Hit the like button for me, and I'll be back next Monday. Not next Sunday, actually. We're going to be talking more about the Cowboys. Hit the like button for me, and I'll see you very soon. Enjoy the weekend. Bye-bye.